A judge kicked a royal guard out of court for refusing to remove his ceremonial cap. But when the silent guardsman finally spoke, her face went pale. She just challenged an Oxford law graduate who knew the legal system better than she did. Here's what happened next. The imposing stone facade of Bristol Crown Court stood resolute against the grey autumn sky, its weathered columns bearing silent witness to centuries of justice. Inside, the usual morning procession of barristers in their black robes, clerks clutching files, and anxious defendants filtered through the oak-paneled corridors, their hushed voices creating a backdrop of nervous energy. It was against this subdued palette that Corporal Bramwell Carriage created an immediate stir. His scarlet tunic and bearskin cap stood in stark contrast to the muted tones of legal attire, each gleaming brass button and precisely aligned medal drawing curious glances from passers-by. The ceremonial uniform of the King's Guard seemed almost deliberately provocative in this temple of law, a splash of vibrant tradition amid the somber proceedings. Carriage moved with military precision through the main hall, his polished boots echoing against the marble floor. 6 years with the elite ceremonial regiment had ingrained in him a bearing that was unmistakably military backstraight, shoulders squared, gaze direct and unflinching. The weight of the bearskin cap, which added nearly a foot to his already considerable height, seemed to register not at all on his disciplined frame. "Excuse me," he addressed a court clerk with crisp courtesy. "Corporal Bramwell Carriage, reporting as requested for the Markham theft case." The clerk looked up, momentarily startled by the formal uniform. "Oh yes, Corporal. You're the witness who observed the incident near St. James's Park?" "Yes, ma'am. I was off duty but happened to be present when the theft occurred." "I see. It's unusual to have a guard in full ceremonial dress testifying," she noted, checking her files. "Courtroom 3, Corporal. Judge Caldwell is presiding. I should mention she runs a rather efficient courtroom. Very particular about protocols." "Understood, ma'am. Thank you." Carriage accepted a visitor's badge with a white-gloved hand, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts as he made his way toward the designated courtroom. Judge Victoria Caldwell had earned her reputation through 15 years of ruthless efficiency on the bench. At 54, her salt-and-pepper hair cut in a severe bob that framed sharp features, she managed her courtroom with the precision and impatience of someone who viewed sentimentality as an impediment to justice before her appointment to the judiciary. She had been a prosecutor with one of the highest conviction rates in the Southwest, known for dismantling defense arguments with clinical detachment. "The court runs on facts and procedure, not emotions and theatrics," was a phrase often attributed to her, one she embraced without reservation. Courtroom reflected this philosophy. Proceedings moved with brisk efficiency. Digressions were swiftly curtailed, and attorneys who came unprepared faced her legendary displeasure. As Corporal Carriage entered Courtroom 3, her clerk was arranging the day's files on the bench. The prosecutor, a hurried-looking man in his 40s named Thomas Whitfield, glanced up from his notes and did a double take at the striking figure. "Corporal Carriage. I didn't expect a full ceremonial uniform. Reporting directly from morning inspection to here, sir, and then to my post afterward. My commanding officer deemed it appropriate under the circumstances." Before Carriage could say more, the bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise. Court is now in session, the Honorable Judge Victoria Caldwell presiding." The room rose as one as Judge Caldwell swept in, her black robes billowing slightly with her brisk pace. She took her seat at the bench, adjusted her reading glasses, and looked up to survey her domain. Her gaze swept efficiently across the room until it landed on Carriage, where it stopped abruptly, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to unmistakable disapproval. "What?" she asked, her voice carrying the practiced projection of decades on the bench. "Is the meaning of this theatrical display in my courtroom? A tense silence fell over Courtroom 3 as all eyes shifted between Judge Caldwell and Corporal Carriage. The corporal remained at perfect attention, his bearing unchanged by the judge's sharp tone. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began cautiously, "this is Corporal Bramwell Carriage of the King's Guard, a key witness in the Markham theft case. He observed the incident while off duty near St. James's Park last month." Judge Caldwell's lips pressed into a thin line as she studied Carriage over the rim of her reading glasses. "I'm well aware of the witness list, Mr. Whitfield. What I'm questioning is the appropriateness of appearing in my courtroom dressed as though for a tourist photograph." Carriage stepped forward with military precision. "Your Honor, if I may explain." "You may not," Judge Caldwell interrupted, her tone clipped. "In this courtroom, witnesses speak when questioned directly. And my question, Corporal, is directed to the prosecution. Mr. Whitfield, did you advise your witness about appropriate attire for court proceedings?" Kick. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, it's my understanding that Corporal Carriage is due at his ceremonial post immediately following his testimony. His commanding officer authorized his appearance in uniform as a practical accommodation." Judge Caldwell removed her glasses, a gesture the regular attendees of her court recognized as a warning sign. "Mr. Whitfield, this courtroom is not a parade ground. We are engaged in serious legal proceedings, not a ceremonial display for sightseers." She turned her attention to Carriage. "Corporal, while I appreciate your willingness to testify, your current attire suggests a concerning lack of respect for these proceedings. That theatrical bearskin hat in particular has no place in a court of law." "Your Honor," Carriage responded with respectful firmness, "this is the prescribed full-dress uniform of the King's Guard. Royal regulations specify that, when representing the regiment in an official capacity, the complete uniform must be worn. To appear otherwise would itself be a violation of military protocol." A murmur ran through the gallery. Judge Caldwell's eyebrows rose marginally at the measured response, clearly not what she had expected from a ceremonial guardsman. "I'm quite certain," she replied, her voice dropping to a dangerous register, "that military protocol does not supersede judicial authority in a court of law. Your commanding officer may dictate your appearance on palace grounds, Corporal, but in this courtroom I alone determine what constitutes appropriate attire." From the gallery, an elderly gentleman with military bearing leaned forward, his expression concerned. Several other observers exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing the building confrontation. "Your Honor," Carriage continued, maintaining his formal posture, with respect, "I am not merely representing myself today, but serving as a representative of the regiment and, by extension, the Crown. The uniform regulations exist precisely to maintain the dignity of that representation." The tension in Courtroom 3 ratcheted higher as Judge Caldwell leaned forward across her bench, her voice taking on the practiced edge that had intimidated countless witnesses over her career. "Corporal Carriage, I will give you one opportunity to comply with the standards of this court. Remove that ridiculous bearskin cap and place it out of sight for the duration of these proceedings, or you will be dismissed from this courtroom and held in contempt." The prosecutor half rose from his seat, clearly alarmed at the prospect of losing his key witness. "Your Honor, if I might suggest a compromise." "There is no compromise when it comes to the dignity of these proceedings, Mr. Whitfield." Judge Caldwell cut him off sharply. "Section 17 of the Court Procedural Standards clearly states that attire that creates undue distraction or disruption is prohibited. That ceremonial headpiece certainly qualifies." Carriage remained perfectly composed, his voice steady as he responded, "Your Honor, with respect, military regulations specifically address court appearances. Regulation 35.4 states that personnel appearing in court while in uniform shall maintain complete and proper military dress throughout proceedings. The bearskin cap is an integral component of the King's Guard ceremonial uniform. Store. I am not interested in military regulations," "Corporal," Judge Caldwell replied, color rising in her cheeks, "this is a court of law, not a military tribunal. Here, judicial authority takes precedence." She turned slightly to address the bailiff. "Mr. Peterson, please inform Corporal Carriage of the consequences should he continue to defy the court's directive." The bailiff, a former police officer who seemed distinctly uncomfortable with the situation, cleared his throat. "Sir, refusal to comply with the judge's order could result in contempt charges, potentially carrying fines or even short-term detention." Carriage considered his response carefully before speaking. "Your Honor, I have deep respect for this court and its proceedings. However, I am bound by my oath of service and the regulations governing my position. To remove part of my uniform would constitute a dereliction of duty as serious as disrespecting this court. That is your choice to make, Corporal." Judge Caldwell responded with dangerous quietness. "But choices have consequences. You have been given reasonable accommodation and have refused it. This is not about your uniform, but about your willful defiance of judicial authority." She adjusted her robes with a sharp movement. "Mr. Peterson, please escort Corporal Carriage from the courtroom. He is hereby cited for contempt of court. A fine of £500 will be assessed." The prosecutor rose fully now, alarm evident in his posture. "Your Honor, without Corporal Carriage's testimony, the prosecution cannot establish several key elements of our case. He was the only witness who clearly observed the defendant's actions during the theft. You should have considered that before bringing a witness who prioritizes his hat over judicial orders." "Mr. Whitfield," Judge Caldwell replied without sympathy. The bailiff approached Carriage with visible reluctance. "Sir, I need you to come with me." Carriage remained at attention, his expression unchanged. "Your Honor, before I am removed, I respectfully request permission to address a matter of procedural law relevant to these circumstances. I have had ample opportunity to address this court, Corporal, and have chosen defiance instead." Judge Caldwell responded dismissively. "Mr. Peterson, proceed with the removal." "Your Honor," Carriage said, his voice remaining measured but taking on a new quality that caused the bailiff to hesitate. "I must respectfully point out that under the Judicial Proceedings Act, Section 42, Paragraph 3, a witness facing removal is entitled to make a statement regarding the legal basis of their position before such removal is enforced." The precise citation, delivered without hesitation or reference to notes, created a subtle shift in the courtroom atmosphere. Judge Caldwell's brow furrowed slightly, the first indication of uncertainty in her previously confident demeanor. "I am quite familiar with the Judicial Proceedings Act, Corporal, and I don't recall any such provision." "The provision was added in the 2017 amendment, Your Honor," Carriage responded, "following the case of Donaldson v. West London Court, where a witness was improperly removed without opportunity to address procedural concerns." Judge Caldwell's fingers drummed briefly on the bench before her. "Very well, Corporal. You may make a brief statement for the record, though I doubt it will alter the outcome." "Thank you, Your Honor." Carriage's posture remained perfect, his ceremonial uniform lending additional gravity to his words. "I wish to direct the court's attention to 3 specific legal precedents relevant to these proceedings." He turned slightly to address both the judge and the gallery, a subtle shift that suggested familiarity with courtroom positioning. "First, in the case of Captain James Harlow v. Manchester Crown Court, 2013, the High Court ruled that military personnel appearing as witnesses may maintain their complete uniform when such appearance occurs in the line of duty or en route to official functions. As I am proceeding directly to my post following these proceedings, this ruling is directly applicable." Judge Caldwell's expression had shifted from impatience to guarded attention. The casual confidence with which Carriage cited legal precedent was clearly not what she had expected from a ceremonial guardsman. "Second, in Regina v. Thompson, 2016. Justice Lawrence specifically noted that ceremonial military dress, when worn by active duty personnel, is not considered disruptive attire under court procedural standards, as it represents an official function of state rather than personal expression. This directly addresses Your Honor's citation of Section 17. A murmur of interest spread through the gallery. The elderly gentleman with military bearing was now smiling slightly, nodding in approval at Carriage's methodical presentation. Finally, and perhaps most significantly, the Judicial Conduct Guidelines of 2019. Section 8 explicitly state that judges shall not require military personnel to violate their service regulations when such regulations do not materially impede court proceedings. The bearskin cap, while distinctive, does not prevent me from giving testimony or observing court protocols. The courtroom had fallen completely silent, all eyes now shifting to Judge Caldwell, whose expression had transformed from dismissive to increasingly concerned as the implications of Carriage's legal knowledge became apparent. "You seem remarkably well-versed in judicial precedent for a ceremonial guard, Corporal," she observed, attempting to regain her footing. "That observation brings me to my final point, Your Honor," Carriage replied, his voice steady. "It appears there may be a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of my position and background that should be clarified for the record. Before joining the Kingsguard 6 years ago," Carriage began, standing at perfect attention before the bench, "I completed my education at Oxford University, where I earned a first-class degree in jurisprudence, specializing in constitutional and administrative law." The courtroom stirred with surprised murmurs. Judge Caldwell's expression froze in a moment of undisguised shock before she quickly composed herself. "Following my studies," Carriage continued, "I was called to the bar at Lincoln's Inn and served 3 years as a legal clerk for the Honorable Justice Blackwood at the Royal Courts of Justice, focusing primarily on cases involving the intersection of civil liberties and state functions." The prosecutor's pen had stopped moving across his notepad, his attention now fully captured by this unexpected revelation. The court reporter's fingers flew across her stenotype machine, documenting what had suddenly become a much more significant exchange than anyone had anticipated. "My transition to military service was motivated by family tradition. 5 generations of Carriages have served in uniform, but I maintain my legal credentials and continue legal education during off-duty hours." Judge Caldwell's fingers had tightened almost imperceptibly around the edge of the bench. "If what you're saying is accurate, Corporal, why didn't you mention these qualifications at the outset of our discussion?" "Your Honor," Carriage replied with measured courtesy, "I was summoned here as a witness to a theft, not as a legal advisor. My appearance in uniform is a matter of military protocol rather than professional identity. I mentioned my background only when it became relevant to the procedural matters at hand." "Furthermore," Carriage continued, "the case of Bannister v. Judicial Services Commission established that witnesses should be evaluated on the substance of their testimony rather than their credentials or appearance. I had hoped to be assessed on what I observed rather than what I wear or what degrees I hold." Carriage continued, his tone remaining respectful despite the devastating legal critique he was delivering. "I must forthrightly challenge the contempt citation on substantive and procedural grounds." He stood with perfect military bearing, the scarlet uniform and precise diction creating an image of authority that now extended beyond mere ceremonial presence. First, under Bristol Crown Court's own procedural guidelines. Section 14, Paragraph 2. Contempt citations for witness conduct require a prior formal warning, specifically identifying the objectionable behavior and providing clear opportunity for compliance. Judge Caldwell's expression had transformed from dismissive to increasingly guarded as she recognized the precise nature of Carriage's challenge. The court administrator, seated near the clerk, was now paying particular attention, her concern evident. While Your Honor expressed disapproval of my uniform, the court did not issue the specific procedural warning required before contempt proceedings. This procedural defect alone would render the citation invalid under the precedent established in Richardson v. North London Magistrate, 2018. Carriage produced a document from within his tunic. I have here my official orders for today, signed by Colonel James Harrington, explicitly directing me to maintain full ceremonial dress throughout all proceedings en route to duty station, under the Military Service Act. These orders constitute a legal obligation that cannot be casually overridden without proper judicial review. He handed the document to the bailiff, who delivered it to Judge Caldwell with evident discomfort. The judge examined it briefly, her expression betraying nothing. The handling of military witnesses falls under the special provisions outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding between the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Defense, which explicitly states that courts shall make reasonable accommodations for military personnel appearing in uniform when such appearance is required by their duty schedule. The court administrator had risen from her seat and approached the bench, passing a note to Judge Caldwell. The judge read it quickly, her expression tightening further. Judge Caldwell cleared her throat, the sound unusually loud in the silent courtroom. She examined the note from the court administrator once more before addressing Carriage. In light of the extensive legal framework Corporal Carriage has presented, this court will take a 15-minute recess to review the cited precedents. She rose abruptly, signaling the bailiff, "Court is in recess." As she departed through the door behind the bench, the hushed courtroom immediately filled with whispered conversations. The prosecutor approached Carriage with newfound respect. "That was remarkable," he said quietly. "I had no idea about your background." "It wasn't relevant to my witness statement," Carriage replied simply. "I'm here to testify about what I saw, not to discuss my education." The elderly gentleman with military bearing made his way forward from the gallery. Colonel Richard Hargreaves, retired. He introduced himself. "King's Own Regiment. Well handled, Corporal." "Thank you, sir," Carriage responded with a respectful nod. "They don't teach that kind of composure at Oxford," the colonel observed with a knowing smile. "That comes from something deeper." When court resumed precisely 15 minutes later, Judge Caldwell returned with a markedly different demeanor. Her earlier irritation had been replaced by a carefully neutral professionalism. Carriage, having reviewed the legal precedents cited by Corporal Carriage, along with the court's procedural guidelines, she began, "This court acknowledges several points that require clarification." She adjusted her reading glasses, consulting notes that hadn't been present before the recess. "First, the contempt citation issued against Corporal Carriage is hereby withdrawn. The court recognizes that military personnel appearing as witnesses while on active duty may maintain their full uniform in accordance with military regulations. Second, the court acknowledges that the procedural requirements for issuing contempt citations to witnesses were not fully observed in this instance. This admission clearly cost her considerable effort. As such, the fine previously announced is vacated." "Judge," Caldwell looked directly at Carriage for the first time since returning to the bench. "The court appreciates Corporal Carriage's thorough knowledge of relevant legal precedent. It appears there was a misunderstanding regarding the nature of his appearance today." She turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Whitfield, you may proceed with your witness." "Thank you, Your Honor," the prosecutor replied, standing. The Crown calls Corporal Bramwell Carriage. Carriage moved to the witness stand with the same military precision that had characterized his every movement. After being sworn in, he stood at a modified attention, his bearing formal but appropriate to the setting. Corporal Carriage Whitfield began. Could you please tell the court what you observed on the afternoon of October 12th near St. James's Park?" "Yes, sir," Carriage responded, his testimony as precise and well organized as his legal arguments had been. I was off duty, walking along Birdcage Walk at approximately 2:15 p.m. I observed the defendant, whom I can identify as the man in the blue suit at the defense table, approach an elderly woman who was seated on a bench. Yes. Account continued with methodical clarity, establishing each element of the theft with the same attention to detail he had shown in his legal challenge. Judge Caldwell listened attentively, occasionally making notes but offering none of the interruptions that typically characterized her courtroom management. When Carriage's testimony concluded, Judge Caldwell nodded. "Thank you, Corporal. Your testimony has been most instructive. You are excused to attend to your duties." As Corporal Carriage made his way through the courthouse foyer, his ceremonial boots echoing against the marble floor, a court clerk hurried up to him with an envelope. "From Judge Caldwell," she explained somewhat breathlessly. "She asked that this be delivered to you before you left." Carriage accepted the envelope with a polite nod and opened it once the clerk had departed. Inside was a brief handwritten note on judicial letterhead. "Corporal Carriage, your conduct today served as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, a lesson I would do well to remember. Your knowledge of the law is commendable, as is your dedication to both your legal principles and military duties. The court regrets the unnecessary conflict and appreciates the professional manner in which you addressed it. Judge Victoria Caldwell." Carriage folded the note carefully and placed it in his tunic pocket as he prepared to depart. Colonel Hargreaves appeared at his side. "Walk with you a bit, Corporal. I'm headed toward Parliament, which I believe is on your route." "Certainly, Colonel." As they exited the courthouse together, the older man chuckled softly. "You know, when I saw you standing there, taking that dressing down with such composure, I thought to myself, there's more to this lad than the uniform. But even I didn't expect a full legal dissertation." "Training takes different forms, sir," Carriage replied as they descended the courthouse steps. "The discipline to stand at attention for hours translates well to remaining composed during legal challenges." "True enough," the colonel agreed. "But it's rare to find someone who excels in both worlds. May I ask why you chose the Guard instead of Chambers after Oxford? With your credentials, you could have had your pick of positions." Carriage considered the question for a moment before answering. "My grandfather served in the Guard, as did his father before him. When I was a boy, he told me something I never forgot. He said, 'The law protects our traditions, and traditions give meaning to our laws.' I found I couldn't choose between them." The colonel nodded thoughtfully. "A wise perspective. Both uphold something essential about who we are as a nation." As they reached the point where their paths would diverge, Carriage checked his watch again. "I should proceed to my post, sir." "Of course," the colonel replied. "Duty calls. But I suspect we haven't heard the last of Bramwell Carriage in either uniform." With a crisp salute that the colonel returned with equal precision, Carriage continued toward Buckingham Palace, his scarlet uniform drawing the usual tourist attention. But beneath the ceremonial exterior, he carried something invisible to onlookers, the quiet satisfaction of having upheld both his obligations to law and to tradition without compromising either. What does it mean to truly respect tradition in a modern world? Corporal Carriage's story reminds us that sometimes what we see as mere pageantry, a scarlet tunic, a bearskin cap, a ceremonial stance, can conceal depths of character and intelligence we never suspected. The judge's quick dismissal of Carriage, based solely on his appearance, revealed more about her own prejudices than about the man standing before her. How often do we make the same mistake in our daily lives? We see uniforms, whether literal or figurative, and immediately assign capabilities and limitations to the people wearing them. We categorize and compartmentalize, forgetting that human potential rarely fits neatly into the boxes we create. Perhaps the true lesson here is that respect isn't about appearances, but about principles. Carriage respected both his military obligations and the court's procedures, finding a path that honored both rather than sacrificing one for the other. His knowledge wasn't wielded as a weapon, but as a tool to build understanding where conflict seemed inevitable. If this story made you think about the times you've judged someone based on appearances only to discover hidden depths, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about royal guards and the values they represent. Press the bell icon to never miss our uploads, and check out the other videos appearing on your screen right now. Have you ever been underestimated because of how others perceived you? Or have you discovered unexpected talents in someone you initially dismissed? Share your experiences in the comments below. We read everyone and would love to hear your thoughts. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time with another brand new Royal Guard story you won't want to miss.